Welcome to Brother to Brother Talk. I'm your host, Mark Carbon-Old, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank. And once again, we welcome you for solution-driven dialogue experience with us this evening. I want to welcome you, and we're dealing with why the continuous protest. It's a subject that I would like to move away from because of a resolution to the issues. Unfortunately, we cannot move away from why the continuous protest without, first of all, answering that question. Why the continuous protest? Police brutality. It's continuing in our communities. It's continuing across the country. So we want to look at tonight just a review of some of the issues that are taking place with the status of the police brutality. On May 25th, George Floyd died after a Minneapolis police officer kneeled on his neck for more than 8 minutes. More than 8 minutes. And that in itself ignited the protest. The incident sparked international protests against racism and police brutality. But in the wake of this mass call for change, police are still killing Black men and Black women at disproportionate rates. Therefore, we have to continue to look into what is taking place, what is going on, that there's been no letdown in the police shooting trends. Let's look at those trends. 2015, 994 people shot, killed fatally. We're talking about fatal shootings, not just all shootings, just fatal shootings. 2015, 994. 2016, 962. 2017, 986. 2018, 991. 2019, 1,004. And midway this year, already 463. And the numbers seem to continue to multiply, and the trend has not backed down since the George Floyd incident, and since the protests. It seems that the police have become even more aggressive. Let's look at what has really happened since the day after George Floyd's death until this August 31st. We just want to look at those 3 months. Over the following 3 months, from May 26th to August 31st, police in the United States killed 288 people. Mind you, this is not for the entire year. We're not talking about the entire year here. We're talking about from May 26th to August 31st, 288 people. This is documented by the Washington Post and the Mapping Police Violence. And this is significant. This is significant. These two organizations have kept comprehensive lists of people who have been killed by police. Now the breakdown. Of the 288 people listed by either the Post or the Mapping Police Violence database, 59 were Black, 102 were white, 42 were Hispanic or Latino, 5 were Asian, 2 were Native American, and the race of 78 people was unknown. 288 people over a 3-month span. Over a 3-month span, 288 people. Something is drastically wrong. And this is why the protests have to continue, are continuing. And we're going to talk more about the protests in a minute. But let's just review a little further, the disproportionate blacks killed. The black population, according to the U.S. Census, only makes up about 13.4% of the U.S. population. But yet, out of that 13.4% population, 20% of the people killed by police during that period were black. It's amazing that 288 people killed, that we're not hearing about the fact that they killed police, I'm referring to, killed more white than blacks. And in fact, they killed the black and Hispanic death toll at the hands of the police equal that of the white. So there's something systemically wrong in the police department that they feel obligated to kill every day. Of course, yes, there may be some circumstances where it's unavoidable if their lives are in danger. But how is it that over a 90-day period, that more than three people, were killed each day at the hands of those who have sworn to serve and protect? Let me just take a sidebar here just for a moment. If the circus came to town and a runaway elephant or some other large animal escaped from the circus, they would get a tranquilizer gun rather than to destroy the property of the circus. They would use a tranquilizer gun to subdue that animal. Yet highly trained marksmen at the police department that can put 3 bullets center mass, which is the heart or the chest, in a tight circle, but yet they cannot find a way to shoot someone in the thigh or leg. These are marksmen. They keep confusing their tasers with their weapons. So we have to look at this. Why this fatal police increase in shootings? Sadly, the trend of fatal police shootings in the United States seems to be only increasing. In spite of the protests, it seems to only be increasing, with a total of 809 civilians, 809 having been shot. We're talking about fatal shooting, 157 of whom were black as of October 30th of this year. Already 809 civilians have been fatally shot across this country as of October 30th, 2020. In 2018, there were 996 fatal black shootings. In 2019, it increased to 1,004. Additionally, the rate of fatal black shootings among Black Americans was much higher than that for any other ethnicity. standing at 32 fatal shootings per million. If there are 40 million of us who are Black, that would come out to 1,280 Blacks killed at the hand of police this year. That's the projection that they're on. But mind you, this problem is larger than just Black. There 809 civilians have been killed at the hand of the police as of October 30, 2020. That's more people than were killed by the war machine in the military in Afghanistan. We have some serious issues that we have to contend with as it relates to policing in this country. The larger picture tonight is why the continuous protests. And so we just wanted to look at some of the reasons that the protests are not going away. And when we come back, we're going to take a deeper look at the protests and all that is involved in the protests and how states are responding to the protests, and why you should be aware of many new laws and the federal government's position on these continuous protests and how it's affecting young people and their lives. And those who are out on the front line protesting, there's some things that they need to know. And we're going to cover those and deal with those shortly. I'm Mark Carvin, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank, and your host for Brother to Brother Talk. This is Brother to Brother Talk. We will take a break and we'll be right back. I'm Mark Carvin, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank. We'll be back with more solution-driven dialogue on Brother to Brother Talk. PremiumBeef.com. Welcome back to Brother Talk. I'm Mark Carvin, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank, and we are discussing this evening in our solution-driven dialogue why the continuous protests. And we have looked at the trends of the fatal police shootings in the United States this year. But we want to also look at the reaction to the protests, the reaction to the protests. And you might find this somewhat disturbing what type of reaction that we are actually getting from the protest. After 2 months of protests across from the state capitol in the state capitol building in uh, Nashville, Tennessee, the Tennessee lawmakers voted for we'll call it a tidy way to disperse their new neighbors, making it illegal to camp there. The law, which also targets protests of public property, makes conviction punishable by up to 6 years in prison and even loss of voting rights. 6 years in prison. Protesters and protest leaders need to be aware that if you're leading young people on these protests, they need to know that if you camp in across from the state capitol building in Tennessee overnight, if you miss when they say the curfew time is over, you can get 6 years and loss of voting right. There's a lot of collateral sanction that goes with getting a felony. And these are not young people who are not intelligent, not smart. Some of these people, most of them are college students, young professionals, and they feel that their rights are being eroded, but there's a price to pay if you're not aware of these new changes. This Tennessee new law. Wow. 6 years loss of voting. What we have to face is Michigan has also created new law. Tennessee's law, look back at that. Tennessee law would rewrite to make it an e-felony. And then you have Michigan's law, which proposed legislation that people would get. Now listen to this. This is Michigan. 20 years in prison. And they call it acts of social and domestic anarchy. Think about that. You go out protesting police brutality and you get arrested and charged with acts of social and domestic anarchy, and you're suddenly facing 20 years in prison or a $250,000 fine. In March, the South Dakota governor signed a law legislation that will boost the state's penalty for rioting and inciting riots, making it felonies. And then protesters in Louisiana, they created the anti-pipeline called it critical infrastructure. So you can't protest pipelines coming through your community. Listen to this. 15 years in prison, and they call it protest on critical infrastructure near pipeline. West Virginia went into its COVID-19 lockdown this spring, but they approved the same type of legislation against the protests. Mississippi passed a law in June increasing penalties of trespassing or damaging pipeline property, and there's a similar bill going forth in Alabama. Other states, South Dakota Louisiana, West Virginia, Mississippi, Alabama, all have passed new laws. While the pandemic was going on, everybody was in lockdown. The legislatures in these states and other states were busy. Oklahoma, critical infrastructure. And these things are happening without a lot of notice to the general population. New laws since the protests have begun that can cripple a person's life. And so it's an education time so that we can make the public aware of these new tools to cripple people that are protesting. But also it's a call for a new strategy. And it's also a call for awareness, because ignorance of the law is not an excuse. These new laws called critical infrastructure. The federal government has not been lax in their enforcement either. In 29 states and in Washington, D.C., over 300 people have been charged with federal crimes committed during nationwide demonstrations. There's the Federal Anti-Riot Act that allows federal government to go after anyone who travels in interstate or foreign commerce or uses any facility of interstate or foreign commerce, included but not limited to the mail, telegraph, telephone, radio, or television, to incite a riot or to organize, promote, encourage, participate in, or carry on a riot, or commit any act of violence in the furtherance of a riot. In other words, you can't send that text message and say, meet me across the state line or in another city. It's organizing a riot. You may organize for people to gather, but those other underlying laws are saying that if something takes place while you're there and your text message went out, you're facing federal charges, violating the Federal Anti-Riot Act. And in the case, there are also the Utah law and other state laws that will allow that you can be charged with gang-related activity, be prosecuted on the gang-related activities if 3 or more people cause more than $2,500 in damages. A Pennsylvania judge set bail of $1 million for a dozen people who protest the death of the knife-wielding man killed by police. Wow. We need to be aware of what's taking place. What's taking place. Look, we're open for comments. We're open for comments from our viewers. If you have questions, you have a comment, send it to us. We're going to take a break and come back, because even I have to take a deep breath. And we're going to look at a few more states and a few more instances that are taking place as a result of people being arrested during the protest. And this is just since May 25, 2020. This is Brother to Brother Talk. We will take a break and we'll be right back. I'm Mark Carbon, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank. We'll be back with more solution-driven dialogue on Brother to Brother Talk. PremiumBeat.com.
How do I write my life story? I know hurt and pain. I don't like either one, whether physical or emotional. Herein contains my story, Not Without Scars, Part 2. Optimism, perseverance, persistence, Resilience, 2 decades of personal struggle. Optimism, I faced the new millennium with hopefulness. Perseverance, my ego, my humble beginnings, my desire to achieve never allow me to turn away from a difficult task. Persistence, opposition should be anticipated as an effective strategy to victory surfaces. Resilience, difficulties do not automatically spell termination. Scars reveal my imperfection as reminders of past episodes of pain, sorrow, or triumph. Scars can tell beautiful story endings or relay misery that wishes to remain anonymous. This work is meant to help others who have experienced decades of struggle. When struggles appear to never end, you must get through the night and face the challenge of a new dawn with fresh hope.
Welcome back to Brothers to Brothers Talk. Mark Carbonell here, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank. Yes, we're discussing why the continuous protests and what is taking place in terms of curbing protests, the need for a new strategy, the need for education for those who would be leaders, who would call people out to protest. You need to be aware of the consequences. This is not to discourage protests. This is to encourage you to know that the boundaries and the potential of being engaging in violent protests, because you don't have to be the one to initiate the violence, to get caught up and have a life-changing experience and altering the course of your life and family. 2 young people, lawyers in New York, threw a Molotov cocktail into an empty police vehicle, and now they have federal charges up to lose their license, to practice law. And it's a federal case. And the breakdown is because the federal government gives money to local municipal police departments, so that gives them authority to come in when you damage that property, or it's attempted murder to throw a Molotov cocktail at a police vehicle. We need to have deep introspection into what is going to take place as we move forward with the continuous protest. Sharon Shepard has raised a question. With the new laws in place, how can a protest be organized? Great question. The protest can still be organized. It's a matter now of instructing the people who participate into the fact, Sharon, that taking a television out of a broken window is not a civil disobedience act. It is now a life-altering act. It's not just a reactionary factor. So people who are organizing protests now need to have a tight rein on what those persons who are with them understand about new laws and how to participate. The protests can be broader in terms of numbers, but there must be control and discipline in the manner and the purpose and the direction. If you are going to protest, aim that protest at someone who can resolve your issue. We need the continuous protest because we need to continuously make people aware of what is taking place, and it's not going to go away. The continuous protests are not going to go away. We're not looking for them to go. We're not asking for them to go away. We want them to continue. But the essence is we want the people to continue knowing full well what the consequences are when protests get out of hand. I'm Mark Carvin Olds, and thank you for joining us tonight on Brother to Brother Talk. It has been our duty to bring to you the changes in laws across the nation, and the fact that the federal government has on the books and are implementing it. Over 300 people already charged with under the Federal Anti-Riot Act, and 29 states and the District of Columbia. Federal charges, as well as new laws in multiple states across the country. Once again, I'm Mark Carvin Olds, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank. Thanking you for joining us tonight for Brother to Brother Talk.